What's good, YouTube? I know it's been a minute, but I've been watching a lot of these top 10 movie of the year videos the past week or so, and I figured I used to do a lot of these types of videos, and this is probably the most movies I've seen in a year this year. So I figured, what the hell? Let's make one myself. And in case you guys want to see my entire list, I have it in the description below, but I figured I would make this video to give a little bit more detailed explanation as to why certain movies are in my top 10. Now, I'm going to start with the honorable mention, and I feel like the honorable mention is kind of a cop-out, but there were a few movies that were so close to my top 10 and were in my top 10 at points of the year that I just have to mention them, and that would be First Man, Creed, Vice, and Roma. Now, Roma was probably the hardest movie to keep out of the top 10, but the 10 movies that I have picked above it are, in my opinion, movies that I think I either enjoyed more or I just thought were better. Now, let's start with number 10. Number 10 is Green Book, which stars Mahershala Ali and Viggo Mortensen, and it was written by Peter Farrelly, which when I initially saw that Peter Farrelly was doing a serious movie, I was like, oh man, this is going to be interesting. And I've always loved the stuff that him and his brother have done. Huge comedy fan, and those guys are kind of the godfathers. So I was kind of like, this should be interesting. And then when the first trailer came out, I was like, okay, this looks good. And I ended up absolutely loving it for a lighthearted story on issues that are relatively hefty. I thought this movie knocked it out of the park. I thought both Mahershala Ali and Viggo Mortensen were amazing. Specifically, Viggo Mortensen, I thought, killed it. So that's my number 10. My number 9 is Spider-Man Into the SpiderVerse. Now, this was a movie, when I first saw the trailer, I was like, I'm gonna pass on even seeing this. Just because I didn't like the animation that I saw from the trailer. It looked corny, it looked cheesy, it looked like a B-rate movie. It looked like Sony basically said, screw it, we're going to just do something to bring the character Miles Morales to life quickly. Like, it didn't seem like they were giving it the effort that I felt that the character should have been given. But when I saw the movie, I could not have been more wrong. I was completely blown away. I thought when I actually saw the movie, the animation fit that story perfectly, and I've actually seen it 3 times now, and that movie should 100% win Best Animated Movie this year, in my opinion. Now, my number 8 is a movie I haven't seen on too many top 10 lists, which is mid-90s. Now, being a kid that grew up that was born in 87, grew up in the 90s, this movie was a complete trip down memory lane. Pure nostalgia. I thought Jonah Hill, for his first project, knocked it out of the park. Any interview I saw with him about this movie, you could really tell the passion and excitement and energy that he brought to this. As somebody who does a little bit of filmmaking themselves, I have never seen anybody as excited, at least outwardly expressing it, when talking about a movie that they made on the level of Jonah Hill as Jonah Hill. So I thought this movie, and this movie may have been my number 1 movie if the ending was a bit different. I loved the idea of how it ended, but there was some aspect of it that wasn't realistic, in my opinion, and it kind of took me out of it towards the end. So that kind of soured me a little bit. But because of the pure nostalgia, it was definitely one of my favorites. Now my number 7 or number 6, or no, it would be my number 7. My number 7 movie this year is Black Panther. Now, spoilers, that is my top superhero movie this year. For people that think either the Spider-Verse, I can see an argument for Spider-Verse being better, but for people arguing that Avengers is a better movie than Black Panther, I don't want to just say straight up you're wrong, but you're wrong. Black Panther as a story is exponentially greater than Avengers. Now, I can see kind of I've seen every single Marvel movie. This is kind of the culmination of everything. Was it a fun, exciting movie? Yes. But was it a better made film? No. Was it more enjoyable to me? No. Just on the character of Killmonger alone, because of that character alone, I think that Black Panther is better. Now, you may argue that Thanos is a better villain. No. Killmonger, to me, is in the realm of comic book villains. He is side by side with Magneto and the Joker in terms of complexity, in terms of, is this guy really wrong? Is this guy really the bad guy? Like, there were many times in the movie where I was finding myself empathizing and siding with Killmonger, and to me, that is the definition of a great villain. And not only did I think it was a better movie, just in terms of the cultural aspect of it, just everything, I think Black Panther, to me, was the best superhero movie this year. Probably my second all-time favorite superhero movie behind Logan. But I will say, too, Ryan Coogler, one of the things he does that I really enjoy is how he brings levels of realism and authenticity to all of his films. So the aspects of Oakland that he incorporated into Black Panther, it just took it to a next level for me. So that is my number 7 movie. My number 6 movie is a foreign film called Borders that probably not a lot of people saw, but completely shocked me, blew me out of the water. And in short, the movie is the story of 2 trolls that meet each other and try and have to figure out how they fit into society. Now, the 2 of them have 2 different perspectives on how trolls or that they themselves should weave into society, and this dichotomy, and it was so good. At one point I thought this might be my favorite movie of the year, and just now as I'm thinking about and discussing it, it's such a good movie. And they could have taken it in a bad direction, but I thought the way they ended the film was great. I thought the woman who played the lead actress in this movie gave one of the best performances of the year. I highly, highly, highly recommend this movie. So that's my number 6. My number 5 is If Beale Street Could Talk. Now, I'll admit I'm a huge Barry Jenkins fan. One of my all-time favorite movies is Medicine for Melancholy. That is the definition of bittersweet, or melancholy, as the movie says. And it's a movie that has just stuck with me and was so well done. Moonlight, also one of my all-time favorites. Now, If Beale Street Could Talk was not on the same level as those 2 films for 2 reasons. Number 1, it just didn't feel anywhere near as personal. And number 2, I thought that the acting just wasn't as good. I thought the writing was damn good. And for me, it should win Best Adapted Screenplay. I thought that in terms of talking about love and racism, this movie had some of the most subtle but most profound examples of both of those things in a movie I've ever seen. Without really trying to give anything away, the two scenes I will specifically that I'm specifically referring to are, number one, there's a scene where the actress, the lead actress in the movie, talks about the first time she knew that Fonnie truly loved her. Now, when she describes that and they show the scene, I'm like, that is so freaking true. Like, in terms of portraying how you know somebody really loves you, thought that was spot on. And then, in terms of racism, when she talks about working in the department store and the way that black men versus white men approach her to smell the perfume that she's wearing, to me, I was like, that is unbelievable. How subtle but profound that was in terms of portraying just the of effectively portraying racism, but in a way that most people don't think about it. So I thought that movie was very, very well done. Now, my number 4 movie is BlacKkKlansman. Now, I won't spoil what my top 3 are at this point, but there was somebody who wrote one of my top 3 favorite movies this year, and he penned a letter to Spike Lee basically describing the reasons he didn't like BlacKkKlansman, saying that it falsely portrayed the real story, criticizing all cops. Okay, I am not taking this movie as a one-to-one, 100% accurate portrayal of the actual story. I'm taking this as a movie, a work of art, and I thought it was Spike Lee's, maybe his best work since Do the Right Thing. This might be his second best movie, in my opinion. I thought, and I was incredibly skeptical because I absolutely hated Chirac. I thought Chirac was trash, one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I literally turned it off with maybe 15 minutes to go in the movie. So, BlacKkKlansman, the way that he wove comedy and serious elements together was impeccable. Now, I thought Adam Driver was great. I thought Denzel Washington's son, I believe John David Washington is his name, I thought that he killed it. He should be nominated. And I thought, again, similar to If Beale Street Could Talk, the subtleties of what is good and what is bad from a cop or other characters in the movie was so well done. I thought the way they showed John David Washington's character, the way they portrayed him in terms of how he was viewed in the black community versus in his mind, he has to do certain things to affect change for that community that may be misconstrued at the time he's doing it. And to me, as someone who's like trying to affect change on a broad scale, I thought this movie did a perfect job of illustrating just how tough it is to kind of toe that line, and just how you may be perceived from the outside, which isn't entirely accurate. So I thought this movie was great. It's my number 4. My number 3 movie is a movie I actually just saw today, and that is Shoplifters. Now, this movie, again, if you're noticing a theme to some of these movies here, is not an easy movie to think about. Again, it's a movie that makes you question what exactly is right and what exactly should you do in certain situations, and just how gray a lot of things in life are. It follows the story of a couple that does a lot of scams and a lot of illegal things to get by. and they have 2 children that, to put it bluntly, are kidnapped. But they're kids that came from horrible situations, far worse than the situation that they're currently in. And what this director did so poetically was illustrate just... He did an amazing job of portraying very mundane moments and making them seem much more significant. And I thought that the way he kind of portrayed the family as human and people with hearts, and leading to the ultimate conclusion of what happens to the family and the children. It was a sad movie, but also happy in a lot of ways. So I thought it was probably the most human movie I'd seen this year, and I highly, highly recommend it. That's my number 3. My number 2, I don't necessarily think it's the number 2 best movie, but from a pure technical standpoint, there was no way that I could not have this movie not in my top 2 or 3 films. And that's They Shall Not Grow Old. It's a World War I documentary by Peter Jackson, and being someone that's really into filmmaking, the technical aspects and the places he takes this film, it's a travesty that they didn't get the paperwork in for the Oscars, because not only would it get nominated and likely should have won for Best Documentary, I don't see how this couldn't be nominated and win every single technical category. They took footage from World War I and horribly destroyed, warped, black and white footage from wide-ranging frame rates from 12 to 17, and they corrected and smoothed all the footage, made it high resolution, changed every frame rate to 24 frames per second, which is the common movie speed, and then colorized it, and then after colorizing it, made it so it was 3D. And in addition to that, Peter Jackson hired forensic lip readers to read what the soldiers were saying, as well as hiring voice actors from the region where the soldiers were from to do the voiceovers based on the lip reading from the forensic lip readers. And this combined all with narration from World War I soldiers that was from around, I believe, the 60s or 70s, from I believe it was a BBC interview, and he wove all these stories together to form to paint kind of a picture of what it was like to be a soldier in World War I in Britain. And I thought my only critique of this film is I thought that the narration combined with the background noise and the talking became a little overwhelming at points, and I felt like there needed to be a breather in moments. But just from a pure technical standpoint, and ultimately the conclusion of the movie, which a number of soldiers from the war all had kind of the same concluding final thoughts of their viewpoint on World War I, and that hit me like a ton of bricks, and I left the theater bawling like a baby. Now that leads me to my number 1 movie of the year, and one of my favorite movies of the last 3 or 4 years. And this is a very divisive movie. Not everybody agrees it's a great film, and there's a part in the movie that about halfway through that takes a lot of people out of it, or in people like my case, ramps it up even higher. And that movie is Sorry to Bother You. Now, this movie I compare in some ways to Idiocracy. I think it is a cult a future cult classic that has a lot of good cultural critiques within it. I spoke to a coworker of mine who this is also his favorite movie, and he thinks it's infinitely better than Idiocracy. He thinks the discussions related to both race and capitalism far exceed any sort of cultural critiques that were in Idiocracy. On some level, I do agree. I think that this movie is such a unique movie and is one of those movies that you go to, and the whole time I was strapped in for the ride, and after it was over, I wanted it to continue another 2-3 hours. Thought this movie was the funniest movie I've seen this year. Had probably the best commentary on racism that I've seen in a movie, and had probably the best commentary on capitalism. Specifically, probably my favorite scene in the movie, and I will try not to spoil anything. Something is revealed about halfway through the movie, and if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. And Lakeith Stanfield, who's one of my favorite actors, with him and Timothée Chalamet, those are probably my two favorite young actors. But there's a moment where something happens about halfway through the film. Lakeith Stanfield's character goes out to the public to reveal this, and you think it's going to be devastating. You think the world is going to take the news like they should, like it's a horrible event. But instead, the stock market flies up. And to me, I thought that was spot on to what would probably happen in that situation. So I thought just things like that, when he goes to the party and everybody asks him to rap because he's black, and that ensuing scene I thought was a really well done scene, in that it was both spot on in terms of just how ignorant people are, but simultaneously funny in the way it was done. But yeah, it's a movie unlike any other movie you will see this year. So that is my number one. That is my top 10. This video probably went on way too long, but I get really into this stuff. So like I said, if you guys want to see my full list, check in the description. As always, rate, comment, subscribe. I'm going to try and do videos every Friday moving forward. I'll talk about that in another video. But hopefully you enjoy this, and take it easy. Peace.